Hi, welcome to this Corp Maths video. In this video, we're going to look at the video solutions to the practice questions on ordering fractions, decimals, and percentages. So those questions that involve ordering fractions, decimals, and percentages. If you need any extra help on this topic, if you go to Corp Maths and you go down to the videos and worksheets section and you scroll down to video number 131, there's a dedicated video tutorial there on ordering fractions, decimals, and percentages. Alternatively, you could scan this QR code. But in this video, we're going to focus on the video solutions to the practice questions, so let's get started. Okay, question number one. So question number one, we've been asked to write these numbers in order of size, and we've been asked to start with the smallest number. So we've got a quarter, 0.35, and 20%. Now, whenever we're dealing with a question like this, where we've got a fraction, a decimal, and percentage, or fractions, decimals, and percentages, and we want to arrange them in order, I find it quite useful to convert them all to perhaps decimals or percentages, even fractions, but usually I tend to go for decimals or percentages. So in this question, what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert all of these into percentages. So 20% is 20%, that's fantastic. 0.35, well 0.35, that's a decimal, and to change from a decimal to a percentage, we multiply by 100. So if we take our 0.35 and we multiply that by 100, we'll get that's equal to 35. So that means it'll be 35% as a percentage. And then we've got a quarter. Now, a quarter is a very common fraction that you'll be dealing with a lot, and it's very important to know that a quarter is equal to 25%. So a quarter is 25%, so that's 25%. So we now know that a quarter is 25%, 0.35 is 35%, and 20% is obviously just 20%. And we've been asked to arrange them in order of size and to start with the smallest number. So let's look for the smallest one. So that's going to be 20%. So let's write 20%. That's the smallest one, comma, our next one. We've now got a choice, it's 25% or 35%. So 25% is obviously the next smallest. Now I'm not going to write 25%, I'm going to write what we were given in the question, which is a quarter. So I'm going to write a quarter. And then finally, we've got our 0.35 because that's the biggest one, 0.35. And that's it, we've arranged them in order, starting with the smallest. So we've got 20%, a quarter, and 0.35 because that's 20%, 25%, and 35%. So that's them arranged in order. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number two. Okay, so question number two says, write the following order of size starting with the smallest, or smallest first. So we've got 0.65, 2/3, and 6.8%. So we want to arrange these in order starting with the smallest. So let's convert them all to decimals or percentages or fractions. Again, I tend to go for decimals or percentages. So I'm going to change them all into percentages. So here we've got 6.8%, fantastic. We've got 0.65, that's going to be equal to 65%, that's 65%. And finally, we've got 2/3. Now it's a calculator question, so you could do 2 divided by 3 on your calculator. And if you do 2 divided by 3, you get that might come up as 2/3, and then you convert it to a decimal, which is 0.6666, and so on. Or it might be displayed as 0.6 with a little dot above it, which just means recurring. So that's 0.66666 and so on. And then as a percentage, well, we times that by 100, so that'll be 66.6666 and so on percent. That's 66.666 and so on percent. Or to be honest, with it being 2/3, I would tend to say to learn that 1/3 is 33.333 and so on percent. So 2/3 would be 66.66666 and so on percent. And that's it. So we've converted them all into percentages. Now we want to write them in order, starting with the smallest. So the smallest will be 6.8%, so 6.8%. Okay, next then would be, well, that's the smallest. Next would be, we've got a choice of 65% or 66.666 and so on. So 65% is the next one, which is 0.65, so 0.65. And then the biggest one will be our 66.666 and so on percent, which is 2/3, so 2/3. And that's it. We've written them in order of size, starting with the smallest. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 3. Okay, so question number 3, we've been asked to write these numbers in order of size, starting with the smallest. So we want to put these in order, starting with the smallest. So let's convert them all to percentages. We've got 60%, fantastic. A half, well, we know a half is 50%, and that's one to know off by heart that a half is 50%. 3/4, that's 75%. Again, that's quite an easy one. A quarter is 25%, 3/4 is 75%. Now we've got 0.3 and 0.4. So to change a decimal to a percentage, you times it by 100. So that means you move the digits 2 columns to the left. So the 3 would move into the 1, so the units column, and then into the 10, so that'll be 30%. So 0.3 is 30%, and 0.4 would be 40%. And that's it. So we've got them all written as percentages. Now we just need to put them in order. So we want to start with the smallest. So the smallest one will be this one, 0.3. 0.3, that's the smallest. Okay, next would be our 0.4. So 0.4. Our next smallest would be, we've done 0.3 and 0.4, that's 30% and 40%. Next one will be 50%, which is a half, so a half. Our next one is, we've done a half, our next one will be 60%, so 60%. And then the biggest one would be 3/4, which is 75%, so 3/4. And that's it. So if we arrange them in order, starting with the smallest, we've got 0.3, 0.4, a half, 60%, and 3/4. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 4. Okay, so let's look at our next question, question number 4. So question number 4 says, on Monday, Jalil writes down the probability of rain over the next 4 days. So we've got the day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we've got the probability of rain, 0.08, 1/5, 7/20, and 31%. I'm just laughing because they're all different, so he's written the probabilities as a decimal, a fraction, and as a percentage. Okay, and part A says, which day has the greatest chance of rain? So let's write these all as decimals or percentages. I like to choose percentages, so let's write them all as percentages. So 31% is 31%. A fifth is equal to 20%, and it's quite useful to know that off by heart, that a fifth is 20%, so that's 20%. Another way to do it is to take our 1 and divide it by 5, that'll be 0.2, and then you can times by 100, so that's 20, so that'll be 20%. Okay, 0.08, that's a decimal number. We want it as a percentage, so let's multiply that by 100, and that'll be equal to 8, so that'll be 8%. And then finally, 7/20. It's a calculator question, so I'm going to do 7 divided by 20 on my calculator, and 7 divided by 20. 7 divided by 20 is equal to 0.35, so 0.35. That's it as a decimal. Then we multiply that by 100, so that'll be 35, and then write our percentage sign, 35%. So it's going to be 35%, and that's it. So 7/20 is 35%. Just doing 7 divided by 20 is 0.35, so then it'd be 35%, just changing that decimal to a percentage. Just want to say that on this one here, the 7/20, we could have written 7/20 and then find an equivalent fraction with 100 on the denominator. To get from 20 to 100, we times by 5. So we times the numerator by 5, and 7 times 5 is equal to 35. So that's 35 out of 100, which is 35%. And you could do the same with a fifth. You times them both by 20, you get 20 out of 100, and then that's 20%. But I tend to, on a calculator question, just divide the numerator by the denominator. And then that gives you a decimal, and then change them into a percentage. Now the question says, which day has the greatest chance of rain? So we've got 8%, 20%, 35%, and 31%. So 35% are 7/20, which day has the greatest chance of rain would be Thursday. So Thursday's got the highest chance of rain, Thursday. Okay, and then part B. Part B says, which day has the least chance of rain? So we've got 8%, 20%, 35%, and 31%. So 8% is the lowest, which is 0.08. And says which day? So that's going to be Tuesday. So Tuesday is the day with the least chance of rain. So Tuesday. And that's it. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question. Okay, question number 5. Question number 5, we've got some numbers here, and we need to write them in order of size, starting with the smallest. So we've got a quarter, that's 25%. I'm just going to write that straight away. 30%, 3/8, 0.2. Now, if you times that by 100, that's 20, so that's 20%. And 0.17 times that by 100, that's 17, so then we would write 17%. So we've got 4 of them as percentages, 25%, 30%, 20%, and 17%. 3/8, we need to write that as a percentage. Now, it's a non-calculator question. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the numerator and divide it by the denominator. So I'm going to do 3 divided by 8. I'm going to do 3 divided by 8. Now, because it's a non-calculator question, I'm going to use the Buss-Shelter method. So 3 and then 0.000. And then I'm going to do my Buss-Shelter, and then I'm going to divide it by 8. I'm going to line up the decimal points. So how many 8's go into 3? 0, remainder 3. How many 8's go into 30? So it's 8, 16, 24. That's 3, remainder 6. How many 8's go into 60? Well, 7 times 8 is 56, so that's going to be 7, remainder 4. And how many 8's go into 40? That's going to be 5. So that means that 3/8 as a decimal is 0.375. That's a decimal number. We want a percentage, so we're going to times that by 100, so that'll be 37.5%. So 37.5%. So we've written them all as percentages. Now we want to put them in order, starting with the smallest. So our smallest one will be our 17%, which is our 0.17. Then our next smallest would be our 20%, which is 0.2. Then our next smallest is 25%, which is a quarter. And then our next smallest is 30%, and that was just 30%. And then our biggest one is our 37.5%, or our 3/8. And that's it. We've written them in order, starting with the smallest. So it goes 0.17, 0.2, a quarter, 30%, and 3/8. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 6. And this is a calculator question, so feel free to get a calculator and to use it as part of this question. Okay, so question number 6 says, write these numbers in order of size, starting with the smallest. So we've got 73%, 2/3, 0.9, 3/4, and 0.87. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write them all as percentages. So here, 3/4, that's 75%. Straight away, I know that one. 0.87, if you times that by 100, you get 87. So that would be then here, this is 87%. 0.9, if we times that by 100, that's 90. So it's then going to be, we'll write it as 90%. And then 2/3, we looked at that earlier. If you do 2 divided by 3, it's 0.66666666 and so on. And then as a percentage would be 66.666 and so on percent. Or some students like to remember it as 66 2/3%, like so. I just remember that a third is 33 1/3%. So 2/3 would be 66 2/3%. So it's important to learn that one, I think. Okay, so we want to write them in order, starting with the smallest. So the smallest one would be our 66.666 and so on percent, or our 2/3. So 2/3, writing what we were given in the question. Our next smallest would then be our 73%. So 73%. Our next smallest would be our 75%, which is 3/4, so 3/4. Our next one would be our 87%, or our 0.87, and our biggest number here would be our 90%, or our 0.9, and that's it. We've written them in order, starting with the smallest. Okay, question number 7. Okay, so question number 7, we've been asked to write these numbers in order of size, starting with the smallest one, and again, it's a calculator question, so feel free to use a calculator. So we've got 65%. 7/10, so I actually know that's 70% straight away because 1/10 is 10%, so 7/10 is 70%, so I know that's 70%. Alternatively, you could take your calculator and do 7 divided by 10, which is 0.7, and then times by 100 is 70, so then we would have 70%. 0.68, if we times that by 100, we get 68, so we would then have 68%. We've got 2/3. Well, remember in our last question, we've talked about this one a lot so far. 2/3 is 1/3 is 33.33333 and so on. So 2/3 would be 66.666 and so on percent. And then our 3/5, well, 3/5, we want to write that as a percentage. I know that 3/5 is equal to 60% because 1/5 is 20%. So 3/5 is 60%. Another way to learn it is that if you had 3/5, that would be, if you double them both, that's 6/10. And remember, a tenth is 10%, so 6/10 would be 60%. Or it's a calculator question, so we could just do 3 divided by 5, that's equal to 0.6. And then if you take the 0.6 and times it by 100, that's 60. So we then write 60%. So we've got them all as percentages. Now we can arrange them in order. So the smallest one would be our 60%, or our 3/5, so 3/5. Our next one would be our 65%, so 65%, that's our second one. Our next one would be our 66.666, that's our 2/3, so 2/3. And then our next one would be our 68%, so that's 0.68. And then the largest one would be our 7/10, our 70%, so 7/10. And that's it, we've arranged them in order. 3/5, 65%, 2/3, 0.68, and 7/10. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 8. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 8. So question number 8, we've been asked to write these numbers in order of size, starting with the smallest. So we've got 66%, 13/20, so 13/20 is a calculator question, so we could just do 13 divided by 20. 13 divided by 20 is equal to 0.65, so that would be 65%, so that's 65%. 0.606, if you times that by 100, that's equal to 60.6, that'll be then, we'd write 60.6%. A half, well, that's equal to 50%, because we know that off by heart. And 3/5, we've looked at that previously. 1/5 is 20%, so 3/5 is 60%. Or again, you could do 3 divided by 5 on your calculator, which is 0.6, so then that would be 60%. Okay, so we've got our percentages. Now let's arrange them in order, starting with the smallest. So the smallest is 50%, so that's a half, so half. Our next one would be our 60%, which is 3/5. Our next one will be our 60.6%, so that's going to be 0.606. Our next one will be our 65%, which is 13/20, so 13/20. And then our biggest one is 66%, so 66%. And that's it, we've arranged the numbers in order of size. So we've got a half, 3/5, 0.606, 13/20, and 66%. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question. So question number 9 is a non-calculator question, and we've got 0.13, 3/20, 12%, 1/10, and 0.09. We want to arrange them in order of size, and we want to start with the smallest. So let's write them all as percentages. So we've got 12%, fantastic. 0.13 times it by 100, that's 13, so that'll be 13%. 0.09, if you times it by 100, that's 9, so we then have 9%. 1/10, well, that's one you should learn off by heart, that a tenth is 10%, so that's 10%. and then we've got 12%, and then we've got 3/20. Now, it's a non-calculator question. We could do 3 divided by 20, or we could take our 3/20 and find an equivalent fraction with 100 on the denominator. And to get from 20 to 100, we times by 5. So if we times the numerator by 5, that'll give us an equivalent fraction. 3 times 5 is equal to 15. So 3/20 is 15 hundredths. So that's 15 hundredths, and it's 15 out of 100, so that's 15%. And that's it. Alternatively, we could take the 3, we could divide it by the denominator, which is 20. Let's put a decimal point in some zeros. And how many 20s go into 3? 0, remainder 3. How many 20s go into 30? 1, remainder 10. And how many 20s go into 100? That's 5. So it's 0.15, and then when you times it by 100, and then that'll be 15, so we'd then have 15%. Okay, so we've got the numbers all written as percentages. Now we want to put them in order of size. So the smallest is 9%, which is 0.09, 0.09. Our next smallest would be 10%, which is 1/10. Our next smallest is 12%, so that's 12%. Our next smallest is 13%, which is 0.13, 0.13. And then our largest one was 15%, or 3/20, so 3/20. And that's it. We've arranged the numbers in order of size, starting with the smallest. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 10. Okay, so question number 10 says, Greg says that 18% is greater than 0.2. Is Greg correct? Explain your answer. Okay, so here we've got a percentage and here we've got a decimal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write them both as percentages, and then I can compare them really easily. So 18% is just 18, and 0.2, if we had 0.2 and we times that by 100, 0.2 times 100 is equal to 20. So that means that 0.2 is 20%. That's 20%. Now, Greg says that 18% is greater than 0.2, which is 20%. Now, 18% is actually less than 20%. So is Greg correct? No. And let's explain that. No. And I've written no, 0.2 is equal to 20%, and 20% is greater than 18%. So that means that Greg is wrong. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 11. So question number 11 says, Sophia says that 0.64 is less than 13/20. Is Sophia correct? Explain your answer. So here we've got a decimal, and here we've got a fraction. So let's change our fraction into a decimal. That's a non-calculator question. So to change the fraction into a decimal, I'm going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So I'm going to do 13 divided by 20. And then using the bus shelter method, I'm going to write 13, and I'm going to divide that by 20. So I'm going to put a decimal point in some zeros, and decimal point above the other decimal point. So how many 20s go into 1? 0, remainder 1. How many 20s go into 13? 0, remainder 13. How many 20s go into 130? So we've got 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, and so on. So 130, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, so 6, and the remainder would be 10, so then remainder 10. And how many 20s go into 100? That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means that 13 divided by 20 is equal to 0.65, so 0.65. So that means that 13/20 is 0.65. And Sophia says that 0.64 is less than 0.65. Well, it is. She's correct. So let's explain that. And that's it. I've just explained that yes, 13/20 is 0.65 and 0.64 is less than 0.65. So Sophia is correct. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 12. So we've been asked to write these numbers in order of size and to start with the smallest. So we've got a percentage, a fraction, a decimal, and a fraction. So I'm going to write them all as percentages. So 0.5, we know that's a half, which is 50%. So 0.5 is 50%. We've got 42%. We've got 4/9 and 3/7. And it's a calculator question. So let's change our 4/9 into a percentage. So let's take our 4/9 and do 4 divided by 9. And if we do 4 divided by 9, or even just type in the 4/9 as a fraction on the calculator, and then change it into a decimal, you get that's equal to 0.44444, and so on, or 0.4 recurring. Now we want to write this as a percentage, so we just times this by 100, so we just do 0.44444 and so on times 100, or 0.4 with a little dot above it, if that's on your calculator display, and times 100, you get that's equal to 44.444 and so on percent. So we've got that's equal to 44.44 and so on percent. Okay, now 3/7, so we take our 3 and we'll divide that by 7. So divide the numerator by the denominator, 3 divided by 7. And if I press equals on my calculator, it says 3/7. I then change the format to a decimal, so that's 0.42857 and so on. I'm going to times that by 100, so that'll be, if it times that by 100, we get that's equal to 42.8571 and so on percent. And that's it. So that means that 3/7 is 42.8571 and so on percent. Okay, so we've now written them all as percentages. Now we can see which one's the smallest, which one's the biggest, and so on. So it says start with the smallest, so that's going to be 42%. So 42% is the smallest. Okay, next would be our 42.85 and so on percent, so that's 3/7, so 3/7. Our next one will be our 44.444 and so on percent, or our 4/9, so 4/9. And our biggest one will be our 50%, which is 0.5, so 0.5. And that's it, we've written them in order, starting with the smallest. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 13. Okay, so question number 13 is another calculator question, and we've got these numbers, and we've been asked to write them in order of size, starting with the smallest. So starting with the smallest, well, let's write them all as percentages to begin with. So 2/3, we know that one already, that's 66.666 and so on percent. And if you need a recap on that, we've done lots of questions with that one already, or you could just do 2 divided by 3, and then get it as 0.66666 and so on, times about 100, so that's 66.6666 and so on. Okay, then we've got 0.61 with a little dot above the 1. So this one would be 0.6, and then the ones are recurring, so 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and so on. Now we want this as a percentage, so we're going to times this by 100, so that'll be 61.111 and so on percent. So we've changed that one into a percentage, and the dot above the 1 just means the one's recurring, so it's 0.611111 and so on. We times that by 100, so that's 61.1111. Okay, so we've now written 3 of them as percentages. Now let's deal with our last one, 13/21. Okay, so let's type that into our calculator, 13/21. So you could do it as a fraction, 13/21. And then you could then press equals, and then to convert that into a decimal. And you get that's equal to, this one will be equal to 0.619047619 and so on. Now we want to write that decimal as a percentage, so we'll times that by 100, so that'll then be 61.904 and so on. So that means that this would be equal to 61.904 and so on percent. So we've now written them all as percentages. Okay, so now let's then put them in order, starting with the smallest. So the smallest one will be our 61.11111 and so on percent. So it's going to be this one, 0.61 with a little dot above the 1. Okay, now will be our 61.9 and so on percent. So this one, our 13/21, so 13/21. Our next one will be our 62.8%, so 62.8%. And then our largest one will be our 66.666 and so on percent, or our 2/3, so 2/3. And that's it, we've written them in order, starting with the smallest. Okay, question number 14. Okay, so let's have a look at our next question, question number 14. So question number 14 says, some of Brian's summer exam results are shown below. So we've got art, 14/25, biology, 64%, that's great, it's a percentage, German, 49%, Latin, 25/43 or 25/43, music 11/15, and physics, which is 54%. We've been asked to arrange the subjects in order, starting with the best results. So let's write them all as percentages. So we've got biology, German, and physics already as percentages. So we really need to convert our art, our Latin, and our music into percentages. So let's look at art. We've got 14/25. Well, in this case, what we could do is we could find an equivalent fraction with 100 on the denominator. Actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to find it as an equivalent fraction. So to get from 25 to 100, we times by 4. So this times the numerator by 4. And if we do 14 times 4, that's equal to 56. So that's 56 out of 100, which is 56%. So we found what he got in art, 56%. Okay, next we've got Latin, which is 25/43. So I'm now going to just type this into my calculator, 25/43, and then convert that to a decimal, which is 0.5813953 and so on. And then convert this to a percentage, which times it by 100, so that'll be 58.13 and so on percent. So 58.139 and so on percent. So that's Latin as a percentage. And finally, music, 11/15. So if we type 11/15 into our calculator, or do 11 divided by 15, and then change that to a decimal, that's 0.7333. So the 3 is recurring. So that would be then 73.33 and so on percent. So we've now got them all as percentages. Now we want to put them in order, starting with the best results. This time it's the one with the highest percentage. So the highest percentage would be music, 73.333 and so on percent. That's music. So music's the best result. Okay, the next best result, so we've done music. Next one, well, we've got 56, 64, so that's biology. Biology is the next one, so let's write that down. Okay, after biology, so let's have a look. So 64%, we've got 56, 58, so 58.139 and so on. So that's Latin, so Latin's the next result. And then after Latin, we have 56, 49, or 54. So 56, that's art, and then physics, and then German. So art, physics, and German. So let's write those down. Art, physics, and that's it. So his results, starting with his best result, was music, then biology, then Latin, then art, then physics, then German. Okay, and let's look at our last question. Okay, so let's have a look at our last question, question number 15. So question number 15 says, put these numbers in order from the smallest to largest. So we've got 11 over 5, or 11 fifths, 219%, 2.4, and 7 thirds. So let's write them all as percentages to begin with. So here we've got 219%, that wants to be done for us, 2.4. So 2.4, if you do 2.4 times 100, that's equal to 240. So that means that this would be equal to 2.4 is 240%. Okay, next we've got 11 fifths. So if we take our 11 and we divide that by 5, or even just type 11 fifths into your calculator, so 11 divided by 5 is equal to 2.2, so that's 2.2, and then 2.2 times 100 would be equal to 220, so that means 11 fifths is 220%, and then finally 7 thirds, 7 divided by 3 is equal to 2.333 and so on, and then times 100 would be 233.33 and so on percent. So we've now written them all as percentages. Now we just need to put them in order from the smallest to the largest. So the smallest one would be 219%, so 219%. The next smallest would be 220%, which is 11 fifths. Our next one would be our 233.333 and so on, so that's 7 thirds. And then finally the largest one would be 2.4, so 2.4, and that's it. We've put them in order from smallest to largest. And that's it. So in this video, we've looked at the video solutions to the Corporate Maths practice questions on ordering fractions, decimals, and percentages. If you need any extra help on this topic, if you go to Corporate Maths and scroll down to video number 131, there's a dedicated video tutorial there on converting between fractions, decimals, and percentages and putting them in order. Alternatively, you could scan this QR code. But in this video, we're focused on the video solutions to the practice questions. I really hope you found the video useful. If you have found it useful, please like it and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.